Coogs House. The Houston Cougars open up March Madness on Friday night with the Longwood Lancers, a team with surprising amount of Houston connections.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, the daily podcast all about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth. And whether a Houston fan or just a hater who came to stop by, thank you for making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. If you want to join the conversation but don't know what to say, tell us down below if you think a fast food restaurant has to have a drive-through. Right? All right, today's show is brought to you by Nissan. More on that in a second. But first, today's episode, we're going to be looking at the Longwood Lancers, and we're going to be talking to someone who can tell you a little bit more about them from an up-close and personal angle. That is Rohn Brown, who hosts the Lancers Pass podcast. In fact, without further ado, let's bring on Rohn. And we are joined by Rohn Brown of the Lancers Pass podcast, all things of the historic Longwood Lancers. Rohn, before we get going, I got to ask, when you started cutting down the nets at the Big South Conference tournament, what was going through your mind?
For me, being a, quote, veteran, because we won the Big South 2 years ago, I was thinking about seedings. You know, where are we going to be placed? Call me greedy for a Big South Conference fan, because we are basically a one bid league. We had a 6-10 regular season record in the conference. So what was going to be important to the committee? And there were a lot of upsets throughout the country and different conference tournaments. You had a lot of 5s and 2s and 3s that actually won their conference, which was exciting. Conference tournaments there. So that's what, honestly, Parker, that's what I was thinking about.
Did you imagine having won the conference just 2 years ago and making, as we just checked off air, a 14 seed? Did you imagine you were going to be a 16 seed? Was the 16 seed a surprise? Were you happy you weren't a play-in team? What was the thought there?
Well, certainly we didn't. Personally, I wasn't. I was happy that we weren't going to be in the play-in game, but I watched the net rankings, the NCAA net, and I watched the results come in from the other one bid leagues, and the number of one bid leagues that had rankings above the 200 mark started to increase. You know, Long Beach State, and then of course you had Wagner and the SWAC team and the MEAC team, and so I thought, we're looking at 15, no question about it. And then some of the, like St. Peter's and got ahead of us, even though on the rankings they were below us.
The Longwood Lancers will play Houston on Friday night in Memphis. Rohn Brown hosts the Longwood Lancers, Lancers Pass podcast on all things about the history, talking with all kinds of athletes from the university's past. I want to ask about the builds to this point, because at this point, the program has won the conference 2 times in 3 years. Greg Aldrich, Houstonian, who we'll talk about some in a second, has built a little bit of a program. And frankly, they've only been in the Division I realm for less than 20 years at this point. Talk to me about getting from that first year in Division I in 2007 to making the tournament twice in 3 years. There are teams in the Big 12 that don't make the tournament twice in 3 years, right? That's hard to do, whatever your path is.
Well, our path was a little bit harder than some teams that go into Division I, because we were independent for 5 years. And that was excruciatingly painful to watch as a fan. We got plenty of games in November and December, but come January, February, it was hard for us to find games. We played all the big boys. We played Cincinnati when they were really good. We played Wake Forest and Illinois, and of course our travel team, as they became, for 2 weeks you're on the road trying to find games. I mean, it's sort of the same dilemma that a lot of like the MEAC and the SWAC teams have, where they go out for those guarantee games. So our first beginnings of Division One were a lot of travel and a lot of beatings and on the horn during the offseason trying to find opponents to play. But 2012, 2013 was a magical year for us because we did gain entrance into the Big South Conference. These schools are very much like Longwood. Radford, who I know you've heard about before, is about 3 or 4 hours, about 3 hours from Farmville, maybe a little bit less than that. And a really good opponent for us. We're very like schools. Both of us started as teacher schools, went co-ed around the same time in the 70s. So you have Winthrop and you have UNC Asheville. You have a lot of teams that bank their athletic reputation on men's basketball. You know, we don't have football. Radford doesn't have football. Asheville doesn't have football. Winthrop does not have football. So that is our flagship sport. And so we're as an institution, Longwood is sort of all in men's basketball, a lot like your Butler or your Gonzagas. And that's where the emphasis is right now.
As far as this matchup goes, you mentioned several teams in your conference that when they're the 13, 14, 15 seed have kind of made people sweat, if not caused some noise in the tournament. Winning that conference, I think, is, suffice to say, twice in 3 years is an impressive feat. Did you know at the end of the regular season that they had a real shot to win the conference tournament? Or when was it until they cut down the nets? When did you know you had a shot to make the big dance?
This year, no. It wasn't like in 2022 where we had a high seed. We went into the tournament as a 5th seed. And our last game of the season was against High Point at home. If we would have lost that game, we would have been a 9 seed. We would have been smack dab in the bottom of the conference. We would have a play-in game, and then we'd have to win like 4 games straight. You know how that works. So no, I didn't even go to the first 2 games of the tournament. I went to the championship game thinking that we weren't going to get that far, and we did, and we just dominated from the jump. So to be honest with you, Parker, I really did not expect us to win the tournament, and especially when you played at High Point's place. In the past, when we won it in 2022, we played at Bojangles Coliseum in Charlotte, which is an older coliseum in downtown Charlotte, and very neutral feeling, almost a generic feel to it. And this year we're playing on the number 1 seed's home court, and it wasn't set up like that after the regular season. They had people bid on the conference tournament, and High Point had the best bid. They have a really excellent facility, beautiful facility, seats about 4,000. You get in there and really it gives a good intimate feel to it, but I had no idea.
I do want to ask about Coach Greg Aldrich and the program he's built in his time there. I think folks in Houston remember when the Longwood Lancers made it in 2022, because that kind of brought his name around the country, but also kind of brought his name back up in basketball conversations because he's a Houstonian. He had a law practice and so on, but he then swapped up and went into basketball coaching using his ministry. Did some great work in the 3rd Ward. All right, now we do need to take a pause in the action here. As much fun as it is to hear about the Longwood Lancers, to tell you a little bit about this week's March Madness Bracket highlight, brought to you by our friends at Nissan, because each week we're picking one team that stands out, a team that's pushed it farther than the rest. Just like any of the 2024 Nissan SUVs, these guys are able to make it to the next level. The Auburn Tigers can only be described as a pathfinder. They've been thrilling to watch and really created a lane for themselves to claim the top spot in the SEC as they knocked off the Florida Gators in the SEC Tournament Championship. They are set to make a run in the NCAA tournament. Take the Nissan Rogue, Pathfinder, or Armada today. Go find your next big adventure just like those Auburn Tigers. Shop NissanUSA.com. Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tournament, whether you're betting on a big upset or just a one seed to keep it moving. It's time to go dancing with America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if you put down and win a $5 bet. That's $200 if you use point spreads, money lines, etc., and hit. You can pick whatever you want, or you can even pick who's going to win it all right now to get Houston at plus 550. You'll notice if you're paying attention all week, that line continues to move. So go jump over to fanduel.com/locked on and bet on college hoops the Cougs until they cut down. And that's FanDuel, official sports partner of the NBA. A lot of crossover and ties between this city and your program that you cover so closely. What can you tell folks that maybe have lost touch with the Greg Aldrich story or maybe don't know it about him?
He does not do things conventional as far as make decisions sometimes. After winning the Big South Conference tournament in 2022, I don't know for a fact, but I imagine there were other schools that were interested in him. Longwood has been known to be a great proving ground or launching pad for athletic careers, whether it's basketball coaches or compliance people or ADs. Our women's coach, who won the Big South the same year in 2022, ended up at St. Louis University, and she won the tournament the year at her first year at St. Louis. So it's been a real launching pad. But Griff has 3 children and his wife, and they're very happy in Farmville and really like it. He recently signed a 10-year contract. So, you know, he's going to be there for a while, at least on paper, because you know how things happen. If the right people get involved, sometimes those contracts change. But he really has tried to build a culture that is an extension of what he did, I believe, with the kids in the third ward, and trying to develop people not just into good basketball players, but into men. I think Waylon Napper is a perfect example. We can talk a little bit more about him, but he is someone that really is the heartbeat and engine of the Longwood basketball team. And his relationship with Griff has just really expanded and developed and strengthened in the last 2 years that Waylon Napper has been there.
And we could talk ad nauseum about the kind of young men that Griff's been involved with, but I would point out to folks that it's also good about like his program produced guys like DeAndre Jordan, right? Like he knew good basketball talent when he saw it. There's a good combination of things happening there too. I would also point out, and I know you're a Longwood person, so this may be outside your purview, but he was at UMBC. His first gig out of the AAU ranks was at Maryland, Baltimore County as an assistant coach the year that they knocked off Virginia as a 16 seed. So I don't mean to worry folks in Houston, but he has literally seen it happen. As a person who follows the program, that win, even as an assistant, I'm sure follows him around somewhat. Does it?
It does. And one thing that you may remember from that game against Virginia with UMBC is that UMBC came out and basically willed themselves to get control of that game from the very beginning. They hit a lot of shots, but that's one thing that Griff likes to do. He likes to instill his will on you, the opponent. He wants to be aggressive. He wants to be physical. He wants to get the ball, pass the ball around. He wants to treat every possession like it's your last. And that game that you're talking about, I think it's very reflective on what we did against UNC Asheville in the championship game of the conference tournament. Very similar game. We did hit a lot of shots. A lot of things fell into place for it. But Griff has a very aggressive attitude when it comes to basketball. And I think through life as well, in doing the right thing and providing for his family and et cetera, et cetera. And by the way, Griff is from Virginia. He went to Hampton-Sydney College, which is a D3 power. They just lost the D3 championship versus Trine out of Indiana. So he comes from a D3 background with a storied tradition. Then he went to UVA Law School and as you mentioned before, went through his private sector of 16 years and now is in his real love, which is basketball. But I think you're going to see a man, and Griff is very animated on the sideline. He tells the referees exactly what he's thinking all the time. I guess some of that law room, courtroom communication comes out probably in a more colorful way than you get by in the courtroom. But I don't mean to say Griff's saying anything particular there, but I don't want to get him in trouble. But I think you're really going to find somebody who is aggressive, and that's the way he played basketball, and that's the way he coaches.
Well, and Longwood folks will get to see Kelvin Sampson. He'll do his own animations and stuff on the sideline as well. We're not going to be judging but that at all. I am going to ask about some of the stars of the team, Waylon Napper and Christmas and Zapata. But I want to ask first, because we're on Greg Aldrich and the connection to the city of Houston, about Jonathan Massey, DA Houston, and then Jalen Bernard from Legacy, Episcopal, and Cy Ranch, all schools in the Houston area. Obviously, it's a connection that Coach has built, as I'm sure, from his AAU time there as well. And dealer's choice on if there's anyone you want to talk about in particular. But have Houston kids played a big role in this program as long as Aldrich has been there?
Well, yeah, going back to when Griff arrived, you had Lorenzo, also known as Shabuti Phillips, who Griff knew when he was 12 years old and played in Griff's program that he had set up. Shabuti and Griff had a instant relationship, obviously, because they knew each other for a long time. And Shabuti was that leader and that point guard that you sorely need when you're starting a program. He really controlled the tempo and really brought everybody around, because when you get into a new situation, you inherit coaches from a previous coach. I think that was before the transfer portal.
Yeah.
And so you inherit all these guys, and you're trying to fit them into your philosophy, and I think Shabuti helped ease that transition a little bit.
It looks like, in watching a little bit on YouTube and looking at stats and analytics, the team goes as Waylon Napper goes. He's a guard that kind of steers the system, head of the snake, so to speak. How would you describe his game, having watched him much more up close and personal than the Houston folks have?
Well, he's always been a dynamic playmaker. One-on-one, he's always had that flash and able to go one-on-one. The thing about Waylon Napper that's so impressive now is his leadership skills and how he's basically taken what Griff wants him to do, and he has installed that with the rest of his teammates. DA Houston is also a leader on that team. This is DA's last year as well, and DA came in with some experience as well from the College of Charleston. But DA has probably the most stitches of any player on that team. He just plays all out. His eye was swollen up from a previous game. He looked like, Rocky and Apollo Creed out there, the way it was closed up. But DA is a gamer, and DA and Waylon play really well together. You have other guards that come out. I mean, we're going to go probably about 9 deep, if depending on Elijah Tucker's status. But you're right. As Waylon goes, Longwood goes, especially against a team that's got an All-American guard that has a lot of that same defensive prowess that Longwood does. In fact, Kelvin Sampson, defense is probably one of his top. Maybe it's his middle name. I don't know, but Griff is very defensive oriented.
All right, now as I talk with Ron here, I'm telling you right now, Amazon Fire TV is the best way to watch college basketball. I got multiple games happening at once right there, and this conversation with Ron's so enticing. It's hard to pay attention to all the things, but I got to tell you that Amazon Fire TV is your destination for sports, from live games to highlights to in-depth analysis and more. Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs, as well as the Amazon Fire Stick that you can plug into your existing TV and provide access to millions of movies and TV episodes, as well as free and live TV. And whether it's opening weekend of baseball, which is coming up soon, or the college basketball tournament, which starts now, you're going to want to have a Fire TV. Fire TV recently created Fire TV channels to deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, all for free. And that includes all of us here at Locked On and most of the big pro leagues and college conferences as well. Fire TV channels let you dive into all of the game, in-game analysis, highlights, and more to keep up to date in the latest in the world of sports, whether it's March Madness, the NBA, or the MLB. Plus, not to mention they have all kinds of great news, entertainment, gaming, travel, and cooking videos as well. Check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. If you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, you really should. Trust me on this. It's going on right next to me as I'm sitting here talking to you. To learn more, visit Amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. I chuckled at a couple parts there. One, obviously, defense is Sampson's middle name because, man, that is his calling card in so many ways. DA Houston, I actually had the pleasure of coaching against. Say pleasure because they beat us. He was tough as nails in high school. I went back. I just, in our pre-pods, I was flipping through trying to figure out what number he was. Those Episcopal teams were really, really talented, and he was a key part of that. They had a couple other guys that played Division I basketball as well. Really, really talented basketball roster. That's neither here nor there. Both play a relatively short backcourt. Napper's listed at 6 foot. You mentioned DA. DA is listed at 6'1". Jamal Shead and LJ Carr are both listed around 6'1" themselves. I'd imagine Jamal's probably closer to 6, but I'd also imagine Crier's closer to 6'2". Traditionally, that means you got to play with some speed because you got to make up for it somehow. Would you describe Longwood as a fast team?
Yes, but it's controlled. And one player that I want to throw in too, he's 6'6". That's Jonathan Massey. And Jonathan was a rookie of the year down in the Southland Conference with McNeese State. He came to us with a lot of accolades, and he plays real fast, very athletic, rebounds the ball well. He's one of those guys that sort of shows up on loose balls. I think that he's sort of in the same status that Waylon might have been last year, as he was still sort of learning the system as a guard. And he's got all the tools to make it happen. But he's going to be something that I believe that your listeners ought to need to listen for. And then Emmanuel Richards, he's a freshman. Remember when we had freshmen that came in the athletic programs? And he's from South Carolina, and he's been a really big contributor as well. So in the backcourt, you're looking at those guys as well. And then we have a couple guys that play more of the 3-4. Michael Christmas, who was a transfer from JMU. Michael is a big guy who can drive to the basket, can hit the three. He's very experienced. This is his grad year with us. We would not be where we are without him. Second leading scorer. So I think you're going to be watching him. And Jesper Granlund, who's from Helsinki, Finland. He's sort of a glue guy. He doesn't have the big stats, but he does all the right things. He does what Griff wants him to do. He plays good defense. He passes the ball. He can hit the three. And we're we have a lot of seniors they're not going to be with us next year. So we're here for Houston.
I got to ask, though, because it has happened twice. 16 seeds have beaten 1 seeds twice. And I think that kind of puts the nation on high alert, right? It just happened last year, frankly. We're like, okay, like these are not just bye weeks by any stretch. Longwood's got some talent. We got to prepare for them. If we were to tell you that, magic ball somehow, Longwood wins. Houston spends, the year as number 1 team in the country, but something, Longwood pulls it out. What has to happen for them to make that happen?
Well, we have to ignore the jersey who we're playing against, number one. We have to go in the right mindset. We need to have great guard play. Waylon Napper, who also wears number 1, is going to have to play a great game, and he's going to need to play within himself and not try to do too much. We're going to have to get our outside shot's going to have to fall. We're going to have to play a near perfect game. We're going to have good inside play. Has some really good games, averaging almost 10 points per game. And then we have basically a 3-headed monster on the post with Elijah Tucker and then Johan Nzimi who's a junior college, a 6'6" center. I know they don't make those in your league, but he's deceptively quick. We're just going to have to impose our will on Houston, and that's going to be tough to do because they are so good. There's so, you have so much experience. We don't play All-Americans all the time. I think one of the few times we played an All-American on a regular basis when there was a guy named Chris Clemens who played at Campbell, who was the all-time leading scorer in the country.
Did it at like 5'8" or something. I love watching his clips because he was a tiny guard. All right, one guy we haven't mentioned because he's played all of 7 minutes this season. I should probably spoil this for the audience. We are recording on Wednesday night for the Thursday morning show, and on Wednesday, a story from The Athletic came out about a guy who burned his entire medical red shirt for 7 minutes of playing time. Ron, I want you to tell this story because it is kind of what college basketball is all about in a lot of ways. The selflessness of it's evident. So tell us what happened here.
So in the championship game of the Big South tournament against Asheville, we were down a player. Elijah Tucker, who I'd mentioned before, had some emergency surgery the night before. He was out, and Elijah and Shimon Zapola are sort of 1-2 as far as who plays the post. Depends on who matches up best as far as who starts. Well, Elijah was out. He was done. And so, unfortunately, we had an altercation where a player for Asheville pushed one of our guys, and our other big man, Johan Nzimi, came off the bench. And you know how that rule is. If you come off the bench during a fight, you're automatically gone. Well, it was like 6 feet off the bench. It was ridiculous. I saw the replay. I'm not going to question the referee's call, but anyway, so he was out of the game. So we really had no post player other than Shimon, and Shimon's one of those players that he'll play like maybe 4 or 5 minutes, and then he comes out, then he goes back in. And so, like in an old sports movie, the coach sort of looks down the bench and sees Trey Hicks, and Trey Hicks was using this year as a medical red shirt, and he basically said, "Look, coach, I'll go in." I said, "I will go in for the team." He was originally a walk-on from Louisville. Didn't get a lot of D1 offers, but he wanted to play D1 and he wanted to put the work in to as a walk-on. So he played 7 minutes and he had a dunk and scored some points and had a rebound, and he was not a difference maker in the game, but he certainly showed a lot of sacrifice, a lot of team first will in making a big statement to not just his teammates, but the country now, thanks to The Athletic. So does that sort of help describe what you're looking for, Parker?
Yeah, it's a remarkable story of selflessness. A kid that, I guess the NCAA could hand in the year back. We'll see, but he tears apart a redshirt year, a year that shouldn't count against his eligibility after tearing his meniscus. The Athletic article says 7 months ago, so not even all of that long ago in the terms of injuries. And he does it basically to make sure that they have 5 guys on the floor that play the right positions in the championship game. I know, like you said, on the stat sheet, he doesn't come across as the difference maker. It's not like they had to have him to win the game or anything like that, but it certainly does feel like a moment where like March is full of moments you want to play back during the One Shining Moment song. Watching Trey Hicks getting off the bench, I know it was a conference tournament, not the NCAA tournament, but almost strikes as one of those moments. Now, as a Houston fan, I will say if that were the only clip from them on One Shining Moment, I would not be horribly upset. but obviously, that's a little bit of a bias. Ron, you do a bunch of work covering the Lancers. As we mentioned, they went co-ed in 76. You've been a part of talking and watching and all the things going on campus since like shortly thereafter. And I want you to tell us about the show you do a little bit and where people can find it and so on.
Well, I do a show called Lancers Pass Podcast, and this started in May of 2020, right when COVID was sort of hitting into high gear. The whole purpose of my podcast is to take a look back into Longwood College and Longwood University athletics. We went university status, I think, like in 02, 03. What I do is purely an independent production. I can, pick the guest. It's not affiliated with the school at all. So it gives me a lot of freedom to talk to people who I personally knew that have a story beyond what they did on the court or field or whatever. I've done a lot of different sports. Obviously, basketball is sort of the most exciting one for a lot of people, but we've had, Michael Tucker, 12 years in the Major League Baseball. He played at Longwood. Of course, Jerome Kersey, Tina Barrett, who was on the LPGA tour for, I think, 17 years, now lives in the Arizona area. And the list goes on and on. But what I find every time, Parker, is the story after Longwood is better than the story at Longwood. What they've done since they left. It's always very interesting and uplifting. And so I've got I'm approaching 90 episodes, about 8,000 downloads. So it's sort of a niche market. It's not something that somebody in Montana is going to want to listen to that has no idea about Longwood, or somebody who lives in Houston necessarily that doesn't know us from Butler or whatever. But it's something that I've do because I enjoy it and have a lot of fun with it.
Well, again, that's the Lancers Past podcast. I think, frankly, like you talked about, guys that are people that have strong stories after the university. Frankly, tells you a lot about the university itself. I want to say thanks again for coming on today and talking to us some about the program that maybe not a lot of Coug fans know very well, but I hope we know a little bit better now. I'm hoping for a fun contest on Friday night. Obviously, I think we both want it to go two different ways. One of us will be happy by the end of it, I think. And again, I'm sure people can find you on all kinds of social media things as well to talk about it. I know you're mostly active on Facebook with the name Rohn Brown, but also on Twitter and things as well. So
yeah, if you go any place where you find podcasts, you'll see Lancers Past. I'm on all the major outlets.
The Lancers Past podcast, wherever you get your audio podcast. Thanks again for coming on today, Ron.
Hey, thanks a lot, Parker.
All right, again, big thanks to Ron for coming through and breaking down the Lancers and their interesting and unique history for us, breaking down more on the game from an X's and O front tomorrow, all kinds of things as we lead up to the kickoff of March Madness, tip-off of March Madness for our Houston Cougars on Friday night. Thank you so much for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. I appreciate you each and every day. Remember to subscribe. We're trying to do a giveaway every 500 subscribers. We're about at 2,100 right now. So subscribe and help us get to the next big marker. Locked On Cougars is a proud member of Locked On Podcast. It's your team. Our Cougars are number one in the South. Houston Cougars every day. Go Cougs.